One interesting moment came when Kenosha police officer Brittany Bray delivered testimony that directly contradicted Gage Grosskreuz's claim that Kyle Rittenhouse re-racked his AR-15 before he decided to throw himself at Rittenhouse. Joining me now is independent journalist Andy Ngo. You can follow and support his work at andy-ngo.com. That's NGO, andy-ngo.com. Andy, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Buck.
Andy, you're someone who, while not a lawyer or prosecutor, very familiar from your work in journalism with the BLM riots, with the activists, including the criminal activists of the left. And so the backdrop to these shootings is something you know quite well. What have you seen? What stands out to you about the Rittenhouse trial, this self-defense trial, as it's been playing out so far?
So even before Rittenhouse took the stand in the courtroom, it was fascinating to me, although unsurprising, that the press had continually trying to gaslight us into what the context is in Kenosha at that time last year in August 2020. We're seeing over and over that the protests were described as racial justice protests, and that it was somehow the shooting was an anomaly, when I've been trying to highlight, particularly through my social media, last year they had days of violent chaos in the city of Kenosha. Marauding gangs of people involving Antifa and other extremists and other opportunists going around setting truck vehicles, properties on fires, people just walking around with bats and smashing up windows and lights and breaking into property at will. And there was no law enforcement. That was truly chaotic and like an experiment in anarchy. It was in that context that you had these people who, vigilantes or whatever you want to describe them, coming in and trying to defend property from being set on fire again. And that is the context that's not being, in my view, accurately represented in a lot of the press coverage that's leading up to the trial and now ongoing.
Annie, all three of the men shot by Rittenhouse, two fatally and one wounded, had criminal rap sheets. Joseph Rosenbaum was a convicted child rapist. Gage Grosskreutz had a prior gun offense. Anthony Huber was a repeat domestic violence abuser. How common is it for these Antifa left-wing types to have a pattern of criminality in their past?
More often than not, you'll see that they have a history of crime. I think it's helpful to understand the criminal history of some of these people who were shot and killed by Rittenhouse, because it demonstrates, and you could actually see in the video that was recorded of the shootings, that these were people who were, in my view, it looks they were carrying out, trying to carry an assault, or in the process of carrying an assault on the teen. So I think the fact that they have criminal histories relating to violence and abuse and illegal possession of weapons or unlawful possessions of weapons, I think that's all actually relevant for the trial.
Andy, I wanted to switch topics a little bit here. We were talking about, obviously, Kenosha, where there were BLM riots, and then the Rittenhouse trial, which is still going on, which occurred during, or rather the shooting that the trial is based on occurred during that period. But BLM is still a political movement, and here in New York City, a BLM co-founder essentially threatened the city of New York to New York City Mayor-elect Eric Adams. Here is BLM leader Hank Newsom saying that fire, riots, and bloodshed will happen if Eric Adams tries to deal with crime. Let's watch this.
If they think that they're going to go back to the old ways of policing, then we're going to take to the streets again. There will be riots, there will be fire, and there will be bloodshed. But there's no way that we're going to let some Gestapo come in here and harm our people. Right? We pray for peace, but Black Opportunities prepares for the worst. We have people in city council who can create problems for him. We have people in the streets who can create problems for this administration by shutting it down.
Shutting it down. Riots, fire, and bloodshed. That's BLM leader Hawk Newsom in response to a mayor who's got a crime, or would be soon to be mayor, who's got a crime surge to handle Andy, I think a lot of people see this and say, what is BLM exactly supposed to do that's good for anybody?
You know, I wish I could say I was surprised by this man's statements, which seems to promise bloodshed and violence in his own words. But we saw over and over left-wing activists, those who were put in front of televisions and seen as role models, promising violence, for example, if Trump had won the election in 2020, promising violence if police weren't defunded, et cetera, et cetera. This is a go-to now. If they don't get their way, they promise violence, and quite often they actually carry out those acts of violence. I think what's telling is the silence from the establishment left. You know, this is a problem on their side, and it's a problem for them to address. The fact that they are silent, I think, speaks to their complacency and complicity, I should say, in this political radicalism.
Andy, always appreciate your expertise. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.